Good morning, my friends. It is 9:45 on the AM dial, and you know what that means? It's time for Java with Jen. Java with Jen. I've already finished my usual iced coffee. I gave a little shout out to Nut Pods, unsweetened cinnamon creamer, which I never use flavored, but it's delicious. And maybe they'll see this and pay me, and I'll become a spokesmodel for Nut Pods. I don't know if I could, but I am pretty nutty. Anywho, if you are tuning in for the first time, it's very rude of me to not introduce myself. My name is Jen Koken, and I am your favorite executive leadership coach. If you are a woman in STEM or another male-dominated industry, and you're looking for strategies, tools, and tactics to be able to be authentic when you go to work, to be able to not just have that mindset and that confidence that you need to deal with the fact that often we are the only ladies in the room and it can feel a little bit disconcerting, but also you want new ideas and ways to lead your team, leave your team inspired, and you're interested in building a legacy that lasts. If you haven't gotten my book, shameless plug, please go out and buy it. This has been in the top books in career advancement and professional development since it came out. And I even have an artist friend that read it and loved it and was concerned she wouldn't, but she did. Yay, Liz Schulze, if you're tuning in. All right, friends. Well, every week this month, I'm going to be featuring a dear friend, Jess Sato, who is a business. Wait, I'm going to go to her bio because it's very impressive. Hold on a minute. Jess Sato she's a business growth and visibility strategist, and she specializes in working with impact-driven women, social impact-driven women, to transform scattered brilliance into one bold, crystal clear message. She uses her particular signature framework called the BOLT method. And she guides high achieving female entrepreneurs and thought leaders to uncover their big idea, align their offers and visibility strategy around it, and step confidently into thought leadership. We began last week. If you haven't had a chance to watch it, definitely go back to watch it, and talked about, because Jess for a long time has talked about big ideas. What is it? So that was always my question. So last week we talked about finding what in your industry, in a sense, you don't agree with, so that you come from a particular point of view. And that is terrific. And we gave you a little bit of homework. We'll see if you did it. I don't know. You can comment below to let us know. But today, now that you got it, what the hell do you do with it? So let me bring Jess on so we can talk about that very thing. All right, Jess, let me let you in to the room. Here we go.
Good morning.
Are you nicely caffeinated? What's that?
Yes, I said I'm glad to be here. I have my beverage, and this is like my favorite mug. I got this in Moab, Utah. It has no handle, and it's always too hot. And I'm like, why don't you get a mug with a handle? But here I am.
That is, yeah. But that's right. You don't drink coffee. You drink tea.
No, I drink tea.
But do you drink tea with caffeine?
100%.
Okay. Even in the middle of the afternoon?
Yes, actually,
Okay.
Probably too much is the truth.
Right. This is not what this episode is about, but I know Jess is the person she always has a beautiful, like clear glass teapot that she's, especially in the winter, because she lives in Colorado. It's early and she's always bundled up in sweaters and, hats, and then making her fingerless gloves, making her tea. Yes. Okay. Do you remember what the question was that we asked people to think about?
Yes, we asked them to think about like what's something that's happening in their industry or in their business world that really like fires them up. It's like you're looking at it and you're thinking, I do not agree with this, or this is really frustrating, or this is a practice that just does not make sense. And really digging into, okay, well, what is that? And what is your perspective on it? What should it look, how should it look differently, or what should be different about it? And we start there to figure out where is our big idea in that.
Okay. So now that's for everybody who didn't tune in last week, so that you can kind of be up to speed, right? Now I got it. What do I do with it? And it's interesting because sometimes, there's that health reporter out, and I always peruse them. And I answered something in Fast Company where it was like, what was one leadership tool that you think is not productive? And I hate the Eisenhower matrix, that whole urgent versus important. And Like, how do you
Yes.
even deal with that when you have, quick questions in your inbox and your calendar's blowing up the way that ours usually is? And,
Mhm.
I said the thing I always coach clients to do is ask, what's the number one thing I can do for greatest
Mhm.
impact today? Is it
Yeah.
strategy? Is it
Yeah.
downloading something with my team? Maybe it's going for a walk. Maybe it's finding
Mhm.
for my kids for the summer because
Yeah.
that's stressing me out?
Yeah.
Oh, so you got your big idea. Now what do you do with it, Jen?
Mhm. Well, I think it sort of depends. I work almost exclusively with female business owners. So in a case like that, what we do is we look at, well, how is this showing up in your thought leadership? If you have a very strong perspective and you have built a business, is that message coming through? Are
Hmm.
people clear that that's your perspective? Like when they work with you, whether that's through your offers, when they're interacting with you on LinkedIn or in other forums, like does that perspective or point of view come through? And the reason that's important is because we want people to see the thing that makes you different, right? I always say your big idea is your biggest differentiator because when people are clear on the perspective or point of view you're bringing and why you're bringing that, then all of a sudden it has this really nice powering effect to increase visibility. It draws the right people to you and sort of repels the wrong people away. I think something similar happens in the workplace, right? When you have a big idea or a unique perspective or point of view, you're going to be talking about that in your day-to-day environment. You're going to be thinking through that lens when it comes to how are we serving clients in the workplace, when it comes to how are we interacting with our employees, et cetera. So I think of it as being, when you have the big idea, then all of a sudden it becomes a thing that you use as a lens or a filter to make decisions, um, to think through, like, how do we want to communicate about this? It becomes a lens for how are we serving people, how are we offering our services, et cetera. So and I guess maybe another thing that we should probably talk about here is that it becomes a thing that allows you to increase your own visibility
Yes,
because
yes.
now you're talking about it all the time, right? It
Yep.
becomes the core of your thought leadership. So to me, it's a very foundational thing that has all these offshoots that you use as a tool for business growth, leadership growth, and thought leadership.
Okay, so I was thinking about a number of examples of that because I feel
Mhm.
like you said something really important last week when you said people think the big idea is some ginormous thing,
Yeah.
right? And I was thinking about there's a leader, a doctor that I coach. It's a group of doctors, and she was newly elevated into her position. And we were talking about. I always start by saying, like, "What's your ideal day?" And one of the things is, she has a small child. She wants to help get to school. But more than that, she's like, there's times in the day when I just need a break. I've been on back to
Mm,
back meetings. I want to feel okay to go outside for 15 minutes.
mm,
Can I do that? And I
mm.
said, well, you're the one creating the culture for your team now.
Yeah,
So yes, you can
exactly
do
right.
that, but that would fly in the face of normal business. Like you can't be not
Yeah.
productive at any point in the day, except what if you going outside
Mhm,
to sit in the sun for 5 minutes or turn your face up to the
mhm.
sun or meditate for 15 minutes or walk around the building and do a
Yeah.
walk and talk with your team member is the thing that creates psychological safety for your team, which most of us are working in a hybrid environment or we're not going into the
Mhm.
office or maybe
Right.
that's the thing you're known for. And the other example, and I mentioned this last week, I just started mentoring this young woman and she's brand new in her position. And she said, I'm used to being busy, but I'm not
Mhm.
getting as much work or something like that. And I wonder if they realize, the guy that usually would delegate to me isn't delegating. And I said, then go into him and you don't have to accuse him of anything. Say, hey, I just want to let you
Yeah.
know, like I have a lot more bandwidth. What if you become the person that he can react to instead of
Mhm.
expecting him to feed you things? Here's the plan that I see. Here's how we're approaching work. Here's how I'm approaching the standard
Yeah.
operating. You're the one who is the what's the word? Not forward thinker, but yeah, sort of like the
Yeah,
yeah,
visionary a little bit in this case. Yeah.
exactly. And I want people to recognize thought leadership doesn't have to wait. When I'm leading the executive presence accelerator, I kind of break it into three parts, like your confidence, your
Mhm.
owning, your being authentic at work, how you're inspiring your team.
Mhm.
How do you want to leave a legacy? But that
Mhm.
thought leadership doesn't, you don't have to be in the C suite or a senior level
No.
to do it. You do
Right.
it now.
Yeah, I
right?
mean, I was jotting down, as you were talking about those two examples, the first one around the culture creator, I think this is where people get lost, right? We think, to your point, where I said last week, your big idea does not have to be some like life altering thing. Sometimes it is, right? Sometimes it's massive. But I would say for the average, it's pretty much providing a new way of thinking about something that happens all the time.
Yeah,
And if you are the leader of a group, I mean, you have such a cool opportunity right from the get-go to ask a lot of questions, to really engage with people that allows you to sort of even further solidify your own thought leadership around certain things. And so you get to bring, like you said, that new culture, that new perspective, and sort of set the groundwork. And, for me, a lot of times I think of this as almost like planting a flag. Like, this is where I stand. And that's especially powerful when you are doing that in service to your people.
yep,
So if I'm planting the flag and I'm saying, you know what, we need to take 15 minutes and get some sunshine every day. Now all of a sudden you are creating a tone and a culture, and you're doing that because it's rooted in a perspective that you
yep,
bring. Like, for example, one of my clients, she was passionate about quality of life for entrepreneurs, for leaders, and that was a huge element. So she would be literally bringing that perspective, like, how do we create better quality of life for our people? Maybe it's this 15 minutes a day. So it's like you get to bring that as a filter or an approach to how we bring it to life. That's the
yes,
part that makes it so exciting. And the other thing I was going to say, about the second example that I think is really powerful is, to your point about thought leadership doesn't have to wait, I would argue it shouldn't wait, right? Part of our growth and development, is really about bringing some of that conversation to the table. And
mm,
when I am working with leaders, one of the elements of my bolt framework is tenacious, right? The bolt framework is bold, original, loud, and tenacious. And the tenacious piece to me is, does this idea have staying power? And is the idea evolving over time? And the only way it really evolves is if we're actually doing something with it, if we're getting feedback from it. So if you go in as a leader of, you know, a team, and you're not getting enough work, and you're like, hey, I could be doing more. Well, help me understand, right? So you're bringing that perspective, and you're bringing it over and over and over again. So there's just so much richness that comes when you have clarity around the big idea. Then all of a sudden it allows you to show up in a much different and bolder way than if you didn't have anything at all.
yeah. 2 points I wanted to make. One is, I think when we think about the words thought leadership, it feels big. But
Yeah,
what you're
for sure.
pointing to is, the thought leadership could be that piece of, harmonious workplaces,
Hmm.
right? It's
Hmm.
not you're in some big magazine, you're on a stage, whatever. It is the way that you want to be perceived, and that visibility that you're then creating by aligning with your big idea and promoting yourself has
Hmm.
you more in tune with who you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then what's the kind of ripple, right? You're creating with that idea.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Yeah. And,
absolutely.
I want to address one thing, because I suspect there will be people who are listening who are thinking, to your point, thought leader feels massive.
Massive.
And there are definitely people out there who will say, oh, if you are a thought leader, that means you are setting the stage and the pace around the conversation for a particular narrative. That is true. There are thought leaders who are literally changing the narrative on a grand scale. But I genuinely believe that on a more local level, you can be a thought leader by having that perspective or point of view and bringing that into the conversation over and over and over again. And so, in that sense, it feels so much more tangible. And I think it opens the door to what you said, which is, n- this doesn't have to wait for future. This doesn't have to be a thing that you look back on. This can be a thing that you're building over time.
Yeah, because that's those small drops, right?
That's
Like,
right.
there's small drops. That's what we're talking about here. All
Yeah.
right, well, friends, Jess, it's been so good. I'm so excited. We still have 2 more conversations, you know? And if you have been sitting on an idea, or this conversation sparked an idea, you're not sure how to make it count, how to move forward, join Jess and I on June 25th, 1 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Mountain. And we're going to be walking you through the next steps live. It's not just about movement, it's about momentum. And real legacy starts today. All right. And then next week, Jess and I are going to talk about when women feel stuck or scattered and what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
That's our next conversation. So, friends,
Can't
thanks
wait.
for joining us for Java with Jen, and we'll see you next week. Ciao, ciao for now, friends.